All right, very good. Thank you everyone for joining us today on this live webinar. My name is Kevin Yanishevsky, coming to you live from sunny Raleigh, North Carolina. I have the distinct pleasure of being joined by the esteemed Greg Bayer from Nielsen. We are going to get started in just about 30 seconds here. It looks like my voice is broadcasting loud and clear, and we have lots of great questions being tossed in. For those of you just joining us, we have the Q&A box available at the bottom of your screen. That is a great place to drop in any burning questions you have. You want to hear from the team at Nielsen or from the team at Pendo on how we're addressing not only the state of product leadership, but also general daily challenges in product management. So go ahead and drop in any burning questions that are coming at you. And Glenn, great question. We will indeed be sending out a recording. So a couple quick housekeeping notes. We are going to put all questions in that chat box that so many people have already shown me is working. Thank you so much. And yes, we will record this webinar. We are currently recording, and we will send out that in 24 hours, possibly less. So with that, let's kick it off. Good afternoon to all my friends on the East Coast. Good morning to my friends on the West Coast, and good evening to my friends across the pond. My name is Kevin Yanishevsky, and I'm joined by Greg Bayer. Greg, thanks for coming.
Hey, Kevin, thanks for having me today.
Awesome, and we're so glad that you're here, Greg, because the central topic that we're here to talk about today is the recent State of Product Leadership study. This is an annual survey that Pendo does conduct. We interview people across product management from all sorts of industries and all sorts of geographies. And what we're really excited about talking with Nielsen today is that we found that you guys really typify finding number 10. One of the things that came out of the research is this reversal of a trend. And we're seeing that more and more product leaders are focusing on feature adoption and usage as the new North Star of product success. This is different from last year, where we saw a feature shipped being a more key measure. And we're really excited to see this more strategic change in product management. What was your response or reaction when you saw this in the research?
I'm happy to see that. I think, as a product manager, you're always balancing work that you do to entice new customer acquisition. But for me, it's the most important has always been, is the work that we're doing continuing to engage our clients? Is it continuing to be adapted and retaining our clients? Because one of the key areas of success that I've always looked at is customer retention, customer engagement, and how we can continue to bring them into an increasingly growing suite of products.
Yeah, that's wonderful. So I just put our headshots up so we can see our beautiful faces. Apologies that we're not able to run the video for our studio audience, but just to kind of kick it off, I did some research on Nielsen, and just to set the stage for our studio audience. How I understand it is Nielsen is a marketing cloud, or offers a marketing cloud rather. Obviously, Nielsen does a zillion things, not least of which the TV studies that we're also famous for. But Nielsen Marketing Cloud is a data management platform that helps combine the data that a company owns, integrated with the data that Nielsen can provide, and of course across all the channels they monitor. You have great clients in CPG and retail and audio and in automotive, and you're solving the problem of data access. So making sure that CMOs can access the data that they need to develop better digital campaigns and make better advertising decisions. So Greg, how'd you get into this in the first place?
Well, I've been in a product role in varying degrees over the past 20 plus years. And I had started back in the late 90s working for barnesandnoble.com when there really wasn't the product manager title. And I was in marketing. I was in their marketing department, and chartered with finding a way to build out what was then the affiliate program to help drive sales through partnerships. And that really got me, even though I was working within Barnes & Noble as a B2C retailer, I was very much on the ad tech side of things there, even before there was really ad tech. And over the next 20 plus years, I've been in various degrees of ad tech, different companies. And I've seen a lot of really interesting, I've been with all the changes, and I've seen, I've developed product management skills specific to the B2B space and specific within the ad tech partnership ecosystem. And at Nielsen for the past couple of years, it's been very exciting because, as you mentioned, Kevin, Nielsen sits on so much data and provides so many different services for its clients around its data. It's one of the more exciting places you could be as things unfold and continue to change ahead.
Yeah, and I think ad tech is such an interesting space, especially when we think about feature adoption as a discipline or as a process, because when we think about a medium like display ads, we're measuring success there in like a time span of months sometimes. And then on the other side of that, when we think about digital and direct response, we're measuring that success sometimes in a time frame of hours. And you can see that I think it's called in flight, and I might have the terminology wrong, but um, how do you think about different features that we offer and how we can look at adoption of those features? What sort of things do you look at to understand if that's working or not?
It's a great question. In our current business, we have really two different areas. There's a SaaS-based business, right? And that's based on offering software as a service to clients on an enterprise level, and the economics of that are typically license fees. And that's very workflow driven, analytics, dashboard driven. There's a lot of that is connection to other platforms in the ad tech ecosystem, right? It's very ultimately workflow driven, and that's one part of it. The other side of it is the actual sale of data, and that's transactional, and that's that cost is based on a CPM, and that is they can fluctuate on the minute, day, hour. And so we look at two, right? There's with the software as a service, the metrics we look at are very much around feature adoption, right? New features that come out, how are people engaged? How long are they being engaged with the new feature? How often, basic things, how often are they logging in? How many people within an organization are logging in, right? There's trends then and understanding around how the software is being used. Whereas on the data side, it's where it's purely transactional. You're looking at much tighter time frames of success, and you're looking at, it's almost like a cash register, right? What was transacted today, yesterday, last month, and how is it trending? How's it trending compared to last year at this point in time? So you definitely do look at different baselines of comparison, but it's interesting because they both feed into one another for success.
Incredible. I want to remind our studio audience that we do have the Q&A function. If you have a question on anything that Greg has said or want me to follow up and double click, I am reading those live. So thank you for those who have already submitted. Please go ahead and toss those in. I'd love to have your questions, although Greg, everything you say is so interesting. I just have a lot of follow-ups. So one of the things that I really liked about some of the conversations we had in prepping for this is you talked to me about preparing for a feature launch, and you talked about some of the things that from a reporting side or an analytics side that are important to have in advance so that you can measure the success of that launch as it happens. Can you talk us through some of that process?
Yeah, sure. So for those of you out there who are B2B focused or ad tech, that a lot of what gets launched in this area of business is not always just something you can turn on and somebody can just pick it up and go, right? It's not a B2C sort of intuitive thing that, it acts like every other app on my iPhone, for example. And so a lot of the prep that we have to do is first, we go through the discovery process like any product team would in defining and scoping the work. And we typically do that with clients' input, and we need clients' input. And then we will, do some soft launch on testing so that we can get clients' feedback, off of screenshots with real working software. And then there's, internal training that has to happen so that the teams who are working with the clients, the client services team, they are comfortable being able to explain anything that needs more questions. And then ultimately after that, it's what sort of self-serve materials are we going to put out there? And whether it's video tutorials or whether it's just screenshots with annotations. How do we make sure that everything is prepped and ready there? And then it's a matter of creating the communication to do that. But we also need to make sure that we have in our minds what we think success will be, right? And what the metric will be, right? So for example, if we're launching a new feature, and to us success is we want people to use this feature to ultimately build an audience and push that audience to somebody like a Google or a Trade Desk. How many people completed that? And so we want to make sure that we get that arc prepared and track that, and that guides us on how we're doing. Plus the qualitative work that we go back to the clients and say, and do some sort of follow-up interviews. We want to mix the both together.
Yeah, absolutely. And Eric asked a really great question in the Q&A that I think is relevant to what you just said about in that preparing for launch, that interaction between, what happens on the product side and then what happens on the customer success side. Organizationally, operationally, how do you draw that line? How do you guys work together?
There's very constant communication with the team so that there's never too long of a period of time where that the internal teams are not aware of what we're doing in planning. So they are looking at things, they're testing things themselves even before clients have access. So ultimately, our ultimate goal, and I think the ultimate goal for any SaaS-based product team is to have your feature set be as self-serve as possible, right? You're putting it out there with the right components around it, whether it's like I mentioned, whether it's reference material, videos, whatever it might be. What can you do to make it as intuitive and understandable without them reaching out to the teams? And then as backup, you want the teams to be able to reach out proactively and coach along or be able to respond. But ultimately the delineation is, in product, we're getting input and feedback, but we're not directly working with the client as they are, using the tool to execute their strategy. That's where we rely on the internal teams.
Yeah, I like that kind of framing of, front lines and behind the scenes. Something that we hear a lot in the customers that I talk to. I wasn't going to ask this, Greg, but we have seen a number of questions in the chat asking about your usage of Pendo. So Nielsen is a Pendo customer. Really proud of you as a customer. And Suzanne asked the question. Let me find it. Sorry. Suzanne asked, has the marketing team adopted Pendo? How are you using it? And also seeing a question from, from Adomas. Can you share some recent decisions you've made based on results and data from Pendo?
Yeah, sure. So we've been working with Pendo for a couple of years, and Pendo is one important tool in our suite of tools that we use to measure success and to communicate and help coach on how to use the features we put out there. We will, we've used it to tag. I mean, the tagging strategy is a big one, right? In terms of the hierarchy of what you want to track and by whom. So, for example, we have clients and we want to be, it's important for us to understand the activity on a client level, right? But then we also want to understand the activity on within the client, how many active accounts are within a client and how many people, what are those folks doing? We're not capturing the individual, who that person is, but we're, for example, client X has 5 people and those 5 people are all equally engaged. And those are things, at a top level we want to know, right? Because the more, for clients who do not log in and do not, use some of the software for an extended period of time, to me, that's a yellow flag that I want to make sure that our teams are being proactive to understand why and what we can do to help re-engage them. Sometimes it's as simple as, oh, somebody left and they didn't, pass on, give somebody new their credentials. So we want to know that. And then we want to know on a feature level, right? Like sometimes we will put guides in place so that when people log in, there's a new modal that says, feature, new capabilities are here, take a look. And that encourages folks to click and go and walk them through what the new functionality is. We'd like to see the success of that, right? Like how many people saw the guide and then how many people went and engaged with it. And then how many people returned, the next week, the following week. So we use all of that really, and then we will stack rank, feature adoption by clients. And it tells a really interesting story to us.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks for the plug there, Greg. That was awesome.
Sure.
I loved that idea of retention as kind of a key metric, especially in ad tech. There's some features that are daily. We talked about transactional, some like, some of the on the data side, some stuff is monthly. How do you think about which of the features you're building in discovery phase, for example? Are you thinking about what's the frequency that we expect for a feature that we might be thinking about building? Is that something that's part of your discussion?
Yeah, definitely is. And the only way to do that is to really understand in depth how the clients are going to be using this, right? So for example, some of our clients are advertisers directly. Some of our clients and so they will have people in the organization use the tools directly. Some of them will say, I want my agency to be the hands-on keyboard for working with my data. And I just want to sort of, look at reporting and high level outputs. Depending on who's using it and what their objectives are, right? This is all tied around media. And so if, certain clients are very aggressive in how they want their audiences to be built and, the fluidity of that. And that's going to change the frequency in which they use it, right? Whereas some other clients may say, look, the cycle of my business, I don't need to rethink my audience strategy. It's month to month. So what's important is when we set up the objectives, we want to make sure that we're aligned to that, because if someone's setting it up month to month and we set an objective that we want these clients in there every day, we're gonna, set ourselves up for disappointment. So as we build out the thinking there, it's just important to know the cycles in which who's using it and what they're using it for and how often they need it, so we can set up the right, measurements of success.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that. I want to stay in the discovery phase when we're thinking about what we're going to build next. And we have a great question about how your metrics or OKRs are defined in that discovery phase. How do you collaborate with, within the product org and within business stakeholders? And do you have any tips on doing this effectively?
Um, so, you know, it's sort of the heart of, right, of every product team on how they want to be
Yeah.
successful, and setting those right OKRs. And you know, the hardest thing with OKRs is when you're starting from scratch with something. Hopefully most of what you do day to day is being informed by something you've done in the previous quarter. And we're going to do, you know, we'll typically set our OKRs by quarter, but what we like to do, you know, if you have that from the previous quarter, you at least have some data to inform what your next set of OKRs should be. Um, and and oh, I'm sorry, I just got a note that we lost it. Can you hear me okay, Kevin? I'm sorry, can you hear me? Okay, great, sorry. So we want to make sure that you know, ideally we're piggybacking off of what we know from the previous quarter. If it's a brand new capability, you know, the OKRs, they do need to be set on some of the what we're getting from the clients, right? I don't like to try and guess too much on a number if there's no baseline, but maybe the OKR then becomes just on you know, maybe softer initial engagement, like, you know, 5 clients adopt new feature, and you know, we've done 2 follow-up interviews to get feedback, right? As opposed to saying client adopted the feature and, you know, used feature 18 hours a week, right? Where 18 hours a week is just a guess. So we'll you know, we'll be fluid with that. Ultimately want to set the teams up for success and point them towards what's going to be really important to move us forward.
Oh dear, looks like my Zoom restarted. Work from home challenges. Can everybody still hear me?
We got you, Kevin.
Oh God, so sorry about that. Well, in the time that we have left, let's pivot a little bit, because Greg, I know one of the things that you're really passionate about is remote work. And I know that you mentioned that Barnes & Noble was the last time you had everybody in the same co-located space. What's your team like? How are you guys distributed today? And how are you dealing with the world as it is now?
Yeah. Well, it's true. It's been quite a long time before I had my entire uh, team in one location. And so today I'm based in New York, and um, we have our development team based in Tel Aviv, Israel. Um, and so this team is basically distributed across three areas: New York, London, and Tel Aviv. We work, you know, for product to be successful, it needs engineering, it needs data science, it needs cloud ops, it needs support solutions, and it needs the client teams as well. So we are used to working remotely, and you just have to be really, you know, proactive. You have to plan your week, right? You have to make sure that the product team is, for example, with Tel Aviv being 7 hours ahead, you're going to get 3 or 4, you know, 3, maybe 4 hours a day of talk time. So you really have to plan ahead of time how you're going to be efficient with the team in the coming week, and balance, you know, what you need in local time zone versus remote time zones. And I think that that's a constant challenge that any product team needs to work with. Now, I'm not even talking about language barriers. We're fortunate in the sense that English is a fine language for everybody to use. There's a whole nother element to that when you know, English isn't necessarily the ideal common language. But what, you know, it's interesting because this is our second week now where everybody in Nielsen is working from home, along with most of us. And for many of us, it's on the team, it's not such an unusual feeling, right? We're used to sort of doing that in the mornings, especially. But and of course, there's no replacement for being able to spontaneously sit with a group and whiteboard something out. However, what we're finding, I don't know, and I've spoken to others about this, we're actually seeing some interesting efficiencies come from this, where people are being much more respectful of each other's time. People are being much more respectful of adding everybody to all meetings, and people can really think. And I think the product team has been really able to think and write, and that's something I've encouraged everyone, is to really, every meeting we go to, everything we're asking for, sit down and write down a paragraph, a page, share thoughts before the meeting, maximize everyone's time. So there is a lot of clarity of thought, which I think has been really helpful. And I'm saying that 2 weeks in, right? 2 weeks from now, I'll probably be dying for someone to yell at me in person or something. But I for now, it's just it's an unexpected positive from it all.
Yeah, totally hear that. And I think that some organizations are fortunate in that they have distributed work as part of their DNA. For companies who are trying this for the first time, what advice do you have?
I think it's a lot of what I was saying in terms of just really thinking ahead and being being thoughtful about how you're planning meetings and how you're using people's time, being understanding that people, like I've had to adjust my schedule. I got to get, my kids up and get them in front of their computers to start their works, their school thing. It's a crazy thing, but schedules are time shifted. And so people have to be understanding of that and work with that and plan ahead for that. But I think that, like I said, it encourages good behavior, right? Encourages people being thoughtful and respectful of each other's time. And I've seen really good results from it.
We're going to have to leave it there because we're coming up on the end of the half hour. Greg, I could talk to you for hours, man. This was
Same
so
here.
awesome. Thank you for taking the time. Thank you for our studio audience for tuning in. We're so glad that we had over 100 people tune in to see this, and countless more will be tuning in on the recording, which will be sent out within 24 hours, maybe less. You can also find us on all of the digital social channels. We have a ton of questions we didn't have time to get to. Greg, I'm going to share those with you, and let's find a way to either in a blog post or in a LinkedIn post to kind of get some more answers for some of our friends who tuned in today. But thank you again, Greg. Thank you for everyone who took the time. And hey, stay safe, stay sane, stay productive. We're going to get through this.
Thanks so much.